I don't have a giant shop, or a CNC machine, or a laser cutter, but what I do have are a specific set of skills. Skills that make me not even need any of that crap. So if you're following this series, the last we left off, we made these hatches. Completely non-welded, all out of aluminum, super rigid, perfect for my project. They're cut super square, so when you turf them, they will look right. A lot of people try to re-turf, like older bass boats, where the compartment edges are really rounded off and they're spaced out to compensate for the gap of carpet. And when you turf them, they don't look quite right. We're not going to have that problem here because we're going to make this deck specifically for turf. In fact, that's exactly what we did. What this means, though, is anything we want to attach to the lid itself needs to be now, before we apply the turf. So we're making this gusset. That's 1x2 channel. It's about an 1/8 inch thick. We prep this the same way as we prep any other sort of aluminum surface. Kind of rough it up, make sure we clear it with acetone until the rag wipes clean wherever you wipe it. I contemplated doing this. I don't know if this is an actual waste of time. One of you will likely tell me whether or not it was, but I tell you, I asked everybody under the sun, including the illustrious Lowe's experts, whether or not this stuff actually will divert heat if we use it like this. They said I don't know. Somebody told me that actually just transfers heat to everything, so it's the exact opposite of what I did there. But what I will tell you is I did some hatches with that stuff and some without. So we will find out whether or not it does anything. It's either just laying aluminum on top of aluminum, or it's making it worse, or it's not doing anything at all, or it actually is going to deflect heat better than the rest of the shields. We'll find out. But this is the black tip camo turf from my store, and I love this stuff so much from the other build that I decided to bring it back to my boat as well. So, and I don't know, just the ease of using it, the ease of using this stuff specifically. I think camo turf in and of itself, it's just easier to use and blend together and watch together. You can actually cut this thing up into a bunch of little pieces, like a puzzle, and then fit it together. And unless you really look for the seams, you're not going to be able to tell that it's like 30 different pieces. That's how nice the turf actually is. Fits right in here like a glove. We pre-cut all these, we pre-measured them. And a lot of it actually hides the gusset. The only thing we have to do here is these rivets. I used 3/16 inch rivets for the gusset. I regret that now. The 1/8 inch rivets on the end, where we mounted the entire sheet metal to the tube structure itself, those don't really show at all. It's like the 3/16 inch, the head's just too big. I even tried to grind them down a little bit, and they still slightly show through the turf. It depends on how the light hits it, whether or not they show. Obviously, the deck turned out fine, though. My other thing that I want to do is route this teak decking. For tools, you, for one, need a router. You don't really need an expensive one. It's not like you're routing like wood, like serious stuff. You will need whatever bits you're going to use. These are what I used. I used a fairly kind of a beveled out, but short, like cut in. So that gave me the depth that I needed to cut in. And then the end, the ball bearing, just kind of followed the hatch around the square. Along the line. And it was really easy to do it that way. The other one I used was I don't know what you would call this, but this is the size. The size of the bit determines how big the line is that we're going to carve underneath it. You need some sort of thing to kind of make a jig to kind of that your router will go and follow that line down. That way it'll stay straight. You're going to need clamps. You're going to need a ruler. You're going to need, if you're going to use a Dremel, which we demonstrate that in the video, it needs to be a good one with a high RPM and preferably cordless. That's about as good as it gets. And you will need a soldering iron to burn the edges. If you don't have to do it if you think it's a risk, but if you want like that nice laser cut look where it looks perfect, because the foam itself has it gives this little bit of string, because it is soft. It doesn't route completely like flush. You will have to burn those off with a soldering iron to give it a laser cut look so it looks clean. So it looks like it came out of a CNC machine or a laser cut machine. That's how we're going to do it. We have here a Chicago Electric Harbor Freight router that I scored at a pawn shop for $10. It's unbeatable. So FYI, I have never routed anything in my life. This is the first thing that I have ever routed, and it just happens to be EVA foam. So just putting that out there. So for those of you who've also not ever routed anything, I used 2 bits for this whole project. There was a kind of, I don't even know what you would call it, but this is what it looks like, and then there's like a straight bit. And I used a straight bit to make the lines inside, and then I used the tapered bit here to kind of show the edges here, as we will demonstrate now.
Oh, perfect! Let me show you. Oh, so sweet.
So I'm pretty stoked it worked. It does leave a little bit of an edge, like a rough, like stringy edge, like it doesn't completely just go solid like a piece of wood, because it is like a flexible material. One bigger thing, you also have to attach the ball joints, like the actual strut brackets, on there before you turf it. And that way they don't show like this one did. I fixed it, but it was it peeved me off to have it that way. So after much contemplation, I decided to route my hatches on top of the boat as it would help me with my vision of this whole thing. And then later on, I found out that was not a great idea, and I routed all the hatches on a different table. But here we go. We're going to go ahead and start by installing this cam lever latch. I would think that some people have done it this way before, just it's never been publicized to my knowledge. So I'm bringing it to light here on air. This is the way we're going to get around using a CNC machine for the inside edges. So this foam has a lot of potential with running black lines through the top to make it look cosmetically pleasing. Without that, it's just going to look very plain, and I don't know. I didn't like at first glance how it looked like without any sort of rounded edges, or I would have just kept it. Some things we had to install before the turf, other things you have to install after. This is a great time right now to install whatever latch you're going to put in. Today we're going to be using a TH Marine lid lock.
You have this option too, and we'll keep this in mind.
So since this is the first time that I've ever personally done it, I tried it a few different ways to see what would work and what would stick. If it worked, it worked. If it didn't, I would just have to returf this piece of aluminum. It'd be a waste of money, but it's all for the sake of creation. First, I tried by ultra cutting lines out there with a hobby knife, and then I tried to kind of route it out with a chisel, and that didn't work. It's like way too soft. It wouldn't go with a chisel. So then I tried to use this like ultra cheap routery tool from Harbor Freight. It didn't work very well, but I tried.
This thing kind of blows. It's a mistake waiting to happen. Let me get the Dremel.
If that little thing had a higher RPM, it probably would have worked really well. It was so weak. And it felt like you need a really high RPM just to rip through that, so, you know, your rotary tool doesn't just jerk off the edge and, you know, fly and hit the rest of the turf and ruin your whole thing. So, obviously, a Dremel, you have insanely high RPM, and it just kind of cut very seamlessly through here. Honestly, where I screwed up is I didn't just do this before.
Clearly it's not done, but there's the beauty in cutting that deep and then cutting the initial line, is we can just take that out.
So if you're very savvy with a rotary tool, this will work. You can carve anything you want. I'm just very rusty with it. I used to be really good, which is why I tried to begin with. And if I found my groove later on with it, and then I would have been really, really effective. But, you know, obviously you could tell it was hand done and a little choppy at the end of my product. But I still pulled it off. You still can route it with a rotary tool. That is an option if you have a steady hand.
I got my hand steady with the Dremel too far into it. I probably could have just not even used the X-Acto knife and just gut all the ends. I found my groove, and I could have probably carved that out perfectly. If it's gonna have flaws, I'm gonna own them, because this is my boat, and I don't really, for the sake of creation, I don't particularly care if it has flaws. But I think now that we added that border, we have to add a border for the whole thing. So this was a lot easier since we're going to be following a guide, and you didn't have to free flow it like I did that circle, which was hard to do no matter what. I went back and used a router instead of the Dremel, and it was still, you know, a little difficult. But then I found my groove with the router, and then later on, if I had just had a little bit more time and practice on this, I would have got it. So my advice to you is take a scrap piece of this and just practice at it and go at it till you find your groove with the tool, and then your product will be probably a lot better. This worked though very well because it had a guide. I just used a piece of tubing or a piece of angle. It was 2.5 inches out from my line. My line was 1.5 inches in, but you can make your lines however deep or however thin. And if you're really good with a router, you could probably just do this all with a router and no Dremel, or vice versa. I found out, you know, with kind of using the tubes and the angle as a jig to run the lines inside the turf, and then the obvious carving outside of the turf, the line outside, that was really easy to do. It was like the inside design that I struggled on, but I would have eventually got if, you know, just with time and practice, everything refines. You know, the ability and the talent needs to be there, and then obviously the refining of the actual skill here. Again, my advice to do this is just sacrifice a piece of this turf on something and practice routing it so you feel comfortable and you don't feel, you know, nervous doing it. That was the bigger thing. Once I had the groove, I'll show you. I just kind of cranked these out like nothing. Later on into this tutorial, I show you how to burn the edges with soldering iron to get the nice clear laser cut look. So stay tuned.
Come out of break of night, and the pink skies waving goodbye. She come out of break of night, leaving no traces around. She's trying to free a reckless heart. She's trying to be as light as a breeze. Queen of art, Friday morning. The queen of art, Friday morning. She come out of break of night. Discreet as always. You come out of break the night, you'll be wearing her charm so frail. Yeah, she's trying to avoid everyone. Even the battle for peace. Queen of art, Friday morning. The queen of art, Friday morning.
That's the only wooden panel on the boat besides the ones that are carpeted that I reused. I ran out of aluminum. I didn't want to go buy a whole 10-foot sheet just to do one hatch. It wasn't too bad. I just used contact cement, went onto wood like nothing. So definitely goes onto wood. We're gonna go ahead and do the sides. The sides are the only thing that's left to turf. Let's do it.
Note that before I put these side pieces on, I had already riveted those side panels to the frame.
The side turf came out questionable for sure. Okay, so it looks pretty questionable, but I'll take it. Let's hope the other side turns out a little better than this. Like, it's okay.
So thank you for watching all that. That is the extent of how I redid my deck with an all aluminum and turf platform that looks really clean with no welding needed, no serious fabrication needed, just a little bit of ingenuity out of this small garage. And the next thing I kind of engineered were these manual gravity fed power poles. These are already been done for kayaks through Kayak DIY and Kayak Dad. I just took their ideas and I refined them and made them fittable for these boats. And if it can hold a boat this big, imagine what it can do for your boat. If you want the extended version of these videos or just more content in general, step-by-step, non-edited raw footage, check me out on patreon.com/TBNation or simply become a member of this channel and get the perks for it. Thank you very much. Stay tuned.